I was in my dorm room when my phone rang. Seeing Dad's name on the screen made me smile. He usually called on Mondays, but today was Thursday. Hey, Dad. Jennifer, sweetie. His voice sounded different, tired. I need to talk to you about something important. Can you come home? My heart skipped a beat. Dad wasn't the type to be dramatic. What's wrong? We should talk in person, please. I checked my calendar. Midterms were coming up. I can come in 3 weeks. Is that okay? Yes, that's fine. He paused. I love you, Jennifer. Those 3 weeks felt like forever. I could barely focus on my studies, always wondering what Dad needed to tell me. The train ride home felt never-ending. I stared out the window at the familiar landscapes, my stomach in knots. When I finally got home, my stepmom, Laura, opened the door. Her face was tense, and she hugged me, something she rarely did. He's in his office, she said softly, leading me down the hallway. The moment I saw Dad, my blood ran cold. He was sitting at his big oak desk, but he looked small. His clothes were loose, his face pale. Jennifer, he said with a weak smile. Come here, sweetheart. I rushed to hug him, trying not to show how shocked I was by how fragile he felt. Dad, what's going on? He gestured for me to sit and took a deep breath. The doctors found cancer, honey. It's advanced. They don't think I have much time left. The room spun. Laura held me as I struggled to breathe. I'm so sorry, Dad whispered. I hope you can visit often. I want to spend as much time with you as I can. That weekend, we stayed together the whole time. Dad barely ate, but he talked more than ever. He told stories about my childhood, my first steps, my first words, the time I painted the cat purple.
And he talked about Mom.
Your mother was the most beautiful woman I had ever seen, he said, his eyes distant. The day she walked into that coffee shop, I was so distracted staring at her that I spilled my drink all over myself. When Dad told these stories, Laura would quietly leave the room to give us space. Dad's voice always softened when he talked about Mom, about how she fought her illness until the very end. How brave she was, even when she knew she wouldn't be there to watch me grow up. I was 9 when Mom died, but listening to Dad's stories made her feel close again, like she was right there with us. Even though my heart was breaking for him, those moments felt special, like he was giving me back memories of her that I had forgotten. After that first weekend, everything changed. I started calling Dad every day between classes. Instead of visiting once a month, I took the train home every weekend. Each time I called, his voice sounded a little weaker. But he always perked up when I told him about my classes or life on campus. At first, Laura seemed supportive. But after a few weeks, something changed. The hug stopped. Instead of warm greetings, she gave me short nods. At dinner, she barely ate and wouldn't look at me. How are your classes going, Jennifer? Dad would ask, trying to ease the tension. Good, I'd say, noticing Laura's jaw tighten. I got an A on my psychology paper. That's wonderful, sweetheart.
Slam.
Laura would push her chair back, the sound of wood scraping against the floor, and storm off to the kitchen. In October, Dad started chemotherapy. His hospital stays got longer and more frequent. At home, everything felt worse. Laura stopped talking to me completely. The house was full of slamming doors. The kitchen, her bedroom, the bathroom.
Slam, slam, slam.
One Saturday evening, after spending the whole afternoon with Dad at the hospital, I came home starving. The house was dark and quiet, no smell of food, no pots on the stove. Nothing. I found Laura in the living room, scrolling through her phone. What's for dinner? I asked. She looked up, her face cold. I didn't make anything. I wasn't planning on having to feed you. Her words hit me like a slap. What do you mean? I come home every weekend now. Exactly. She put her phone down. You're here every weekend. If you want to eat, cook for yourself. I stared at her, shocked by her tone. What's going on, Laura? Why are you acting like this? Nothing's going on, she said, her voice full of sarcasm. I just think you're coming here a little too often. My father has cancer, I said, my voice shaking. He's sick. Of course, I'm coming to see him." She muttered something under her breath and went back to her phone, completely ignoring me. I stood there for a moment, then went upstairs without dinner. Lying in bed, I heard another door slam somewhere in the house. I thought about telling Dad, but he had enough to deal with. The last thing he needed was to worry about the tension between his wife and daughter. After a month of intense chemotherapy, Dad was finally released from the hospital. The doctors were cautiously hopeful, saying his body was responding well to the treatment. As soon as I got the news, I booked my usual weekend train ticket home, excited to see him feeling better. The autumn air was crisp as I walked up the driveway that Saturday afternoon. Something felt different. There were more cars than usual parked outside. I recognized one right away, Raymond's sleek black Nissan. He never stopped talking about that car when we were teenagers. My stomach tightened. If Raymond was here, that meant Emma probably was too. I hadn't seen my step-siblings in over a year, and I was fine with that. Emma, being a year older, always acted like she was better than me. And Raymond, 7 years older, treated me like I was too young to matter. The front door was unlocked. When I stepped inside, I saw Dad sitting in his favorite armchair. He looked tired, but much better than before. His smile when he saw me made my heart warm. "There's my girl," he said, reaching for a hug. "How are you feeling, Dad?" Before we could talk more, Laura appeared, Emma and Raymond right behind her. I greeted them quickly and went upstairs to drop off my bags. As I climbed the stairs, I heard them laughing about something in the kitchen. The sound made me feel like an outsider in my own home, a feeling I thought I'd left behind when they all moved out years ago. I reached my bedroom door and froze. It was open, and inside was not my room anymore. My vintage movie posters were gone, replaced by Emma's fancy art prints. My purple bedspread had disappeared, replaced by a plain white duvet covered in at least 80 decorative pillows. Emma's clothes were hanging in my closet. Her makeup was scattered across my dresser. My hands shook as I stormed back downstairs. "Laura, can I talk to you for a minute?" "Privately." She followed me into the living room, her fake smile still plastered on her face. "Why is Emma in my room?" I try to keep my voice calm. "Why is Emma in my room?" "Oh, that." Laura waved her hand like it was nothing. "Since they're moving back, it made sense to give Emma the bigger room. You're only here on weekends after all." "That's my room," I said through clenched teeth. "It's always been my room." "There are 2 perfectly good guest rooms upstairs," she said. "Do you really want to upset your father over something so small?" Her smile never faded as she lowered her voice. "He's finally feeling better. Do you want to stress him out over a bedroom?" Her words hit exactly where she wanted them to. I looked over at Dad. He was happily chatting with Raymond, looking healthier than I'd seen him in weeks. My shoulders slumped.
Fine.
"Which guest room can I use?" "The small one at the end of the hall," Laura said sweetly. "Emma's things are in the other one." I bit my tongue and went upstairs to move my weekend bag. If you could even call a room, it was tiny, just big enough for a twin bed and a small dresser. The walls were painted that ugly beige color I had always hated. The only window faced the neighbor's brick wall. The next morning, we all sat down for lunch. Dad was at the head of the table, picking at his special diet food while the rest of us had Laura's pot roast. The silence was heavy, so I decided to break it. "So, Emma," I said, trying to sound casual, "how long are you planning to stay?" Emma looked up from her plate with that same smug smile I remembered from our teen years. "Oh, I'm not just staying. I'm moving back. Permanently." My stomach twisted. "Someone needs to take care of Dad," she added, tilting her head. "Since you're so busy with college and everything." My face burned. "I come home every weekend." "Weekends aren't enough," Emma interrupted. "Dad needs constant care and attention. But don't worry, I'll handle it. I'm happy to make the sacrifice." Raymond cleared his throat. "Yeah, I'm staying too. Got some remote work lined up. Figured the family should stick together during tough times." I glanced at Laura. She was watching me with a satisfied look, like a cat that had just cornered a mouse. My hands clenched under the table. I opened my mouth to respond, but then I glanced at Dad. He was smiling softly, clearly happy to have everyone around him. The words died in my throat. 3 weeks later, I was in my dorm room, working on a paper, when my phone rang. It was Aunt Anna, Dad's sister. "Jennifer, honey," her voice was shaky. "Your father, he's gotten worse. The doctors say you should come home." I didn't even pack properly. I just threw some clothes into a bag, ran to the administration office, and filed for emergency academic leave. The whole time, one question ran through my mind. Why hadn't Laura called me? Why did it take my aunt to tell me? When I finally reached the house, I knocked repeatedly. I could hear movement inside, voices, the TV playing, but no one answered. I knocked again, harder this time. 10 minutes passed.
10.
Finally, the door opened. Laura stood there in her silk robe, looking at me like I was some salesperson bothering her in the middle of the evening. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice cold. I pushed past her into the house. "I took academic leave. I'm moving back home to be with Dad." "Don't bother," Laura said, following me into the foyer. "He was taken to the hospital 3 days ago. He's on life support. You should go back to college, focus on your studies. There's nothing you can do for him now." I stood tall and squared my shoulders. "Actually, I have every right to be here. This is my house too." Laura's lips curled into a smug smile. "Don't worry, dear. It won't be for long." I didn't have time to figure out what she meant. I dropped my bags in the tiny guest room and rushed to the hospital. Dad's room was in the ICU. He lay still, surrounded by tubes and wires, machines beeping softly. His face was so pale, almost the same color as the white hospital sheets. I reached out and touched his hand. It was cold. "Miss Matthews?" A voice behind me made me turn. A doctor stood there. "I'm Dr. Jonathan. I've been overseeing your father's care." "How is he?" I asked. The doctor's face softened. "I need to be honest with you. Your father's cancer has spread aggressively. The chemotherapy isn't working anymore. You should prepare yourself for the worst." I stayed until visiting hours ended, talking to Dad, even though he couldn't respond. I told him about college, about my friends, about the A I got on my last paper. Anything to fill the awful silence, broken only by the beeping machines. When I got back to the house, Laura, Emma, and Raymond were in the living room watching TV. None of them even looked up when I walked in. Emma actually turned up the volume. I stood there for a moment, feeling invisible as always, then headed upstairs. The next few days were the same. I spent all day at the hospital, talking to Dad, even though he was unconscious. Then I'd come home to a house full of people who acted like I wasn't there. They talked around me like I was a ghost. Ate meals without setting a place for me. Closed doors in my face. One afternoon, I came home early because the doctors were running tests. As I walked in, I heard Laura talking on the phone in the kitchen. "Yes, I want a complete renovation," she was saying. "New floors throughout, knock down the wall between the living and dining room, redo the kitchen completely." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Are you seriously planning home renovations right now?" I interrupted. "While your husband is dying in the hospital?" Laura covered the phone's mouthpiece with her hand. "Life goes on, Jennifer. We can't all sit around feeling sorry for ourselves. This isn't even your house to renovate." She raised an eyebrow. "Not yet, but it will be soon enough." I stared at her as the meaning of her words sank in. She actually thought she was going to inherit the house. She believed that when Dad died, everything would belong to her. I didn't say another word. I just turned and went upstairs. Only after I closed the door behind me did I let myself smile. She had no idea. This house had never been Dad's to give to anyone. It had been Mom's house, passed down from her parents. And before she died, she made sure it would go to me. The deed was already in my name, had been since I was 9 years old. Dad had only been living here, paying taxes, and taking care of the place as my guardian. Laura had spent 12 years thinking she had married into a beautiful home that would one day be hers. Now everything made sense, her sudden hostility, moving her kids back in, planning renovations. She was already acting like she owned the place. But she didn't. I spent that final week at the hospital, watching Dad slowly slip away. The doctors said he couldn't hear me anymore, but I kept talking anyway. He died on a Sunday at 2:35 a.m. I was holding Dad's hand when it happened. Laura took over the funeral plans right away, acting like the grieving widow in charge. She barely asked me about anything, not the flowers, not the service, not even the obituary. The funeral was exactly what you'd expect from Laura, flashy and expensive. She booked the biggest funeral home in town, ordered huge flower arrangements, and even hired a string quartet. She stood at the front, dabbing her eyes with a fancy monogrammed handkerchief, while Emma and Raymond stood beside her. All three of them were putting on a show, acting heartbroken like it was a performance. After the last guest had left and the flowers had been cleared away, Laura found me in the foyer of our house, or what she thought was about to become her house. "Well," she said, her eyes suddenly dry, "I think it's time for you to pack your things." Emma and Raymond stood behind her, arms crossed, looking like bodyguards blocking a door. I kept my face calm. "I think we should wait for the reading of the will." Laura's eye twitched. "That's just a formality," she scoffed. "But fine, if you insist on dragging this out." The next week was hell. They slammed doors whenever I walked by, had loud conversations about how they planned to redecorate their house, left passive-aggressive notes about my stuff, taking up space. I mostly stayed in my tiny room, counting the days until the will was finally read. When the time came, Mr. Nicholas, Dad's lawyer, arrived at the house. We all gathered in the living room. Laura, Emma, and Raymond sat on the couch. I sat in Mom's old armchair by the window. Mr. Nicholas cleared his throat and began reading. "To my wife, Laura, and her daughter, Emma, I leave my collection of fine jewelry, including my late wife's diamond earrings." Laura and Emma exchanged pleased smiles. "To Raymond, I leave my new Mercedes." Raymond's face lit up. "To my beloved daughter, Jennifer, I leave the sum of $300,000. I saw Laura's smug grin widen. Then Mr. Nicholas folded the paper and stopped reading. Laura blinked. Then, with fake sweetness, she asked, "And the house? Who did my husband leave the house to?" Mr. Nicholas looked at her. "The house isn't mentioned in the will, Mrs. Matthews." Laura's face turned red. "That's impossible. Check again. The will must be invalid if it doesn't mention our primary asset." I couldn't hold back any longer. I cleared my throat. "Actually, the house isn't in the will because it was never Dad's to give away." Laura's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Emma and Raymond looked just as confused. "This was my mother's house," I explained, keeping my voice steady. "She left it to me in her will when I was 9. Dad was just living here as my guardian until I became an adult." The room fell completely silent. 3 pairs of eyes stared at me in shock. Mr. Nicholas awkwardly gathered his papers. "I should be going. My condolences again for your loss." Mr. Nicholas rushed out, leaving me alone with 4 people who looked completely stunned. Laura gripped the arm of the sofa so tightly that her knuckles turned white. "I always thought," she whispered. "I always believed the house belonged to your father." I shrugged, feeling strangely calm. "You should have checked instead of assuming. Property records are public." The shock on her face was starting to turn into something worse. Anger. Emma and Raymond exchanged panic looks, probably realizing that their big plans of living here forever were falling apart. I stood up. "I'm giving you 3 weeks to find somewhere else to live and move out." Their faces darkened. "I'm being generous," I continued. "Legally, I could make you leave right now. But I didn't want to cause trouble while Dad was sick." Laura suddenly snapped. "We're not going anywhere," she shrieked. "This is our home." "No, it's not," I said firmly. "It's my home. My mother's home. You have 2 weeks to figure things out, or I'll have to call the police." They stormed off, throwing me hateful glares. Doors slammed throughout the house. Angry voices echoed down the hallway. Things crashed against the walls. That night, I barely slept, half expecting them to try something. When I finally dozed off around dawn, it didn't last long. A loud crashing sound jolted me awake. I ran downstairs to find Laura in the living room, ripping the wallpaper off the walls with her bare hands. Shreds of pale blue paper littered the floor. "What are you doing?" I shouted. She spun around, eyes wild. "I picked this wallpaper," she screamed, tearing down another strip. "I bought it. I hung it myself. If you want me out, fine, but I'm taking what's mine. Stop it right now. I took care of this house for 12 years, she yelled. She grabbed a vase from the mantel, Mom's favorite crystal vase. I lunged forward just in time to catch it before she could smash it. I cleaned it. I decorated it. I made it beautiful, she raged. You lived here for free for 12 years, I shot back. You never paid property taxes. You never even had a job. Dad paid for everything. She didn't answer. Instead, she shoved the coffee table over, sending books and framed photos crashing to the floor. Then she ripped books off the shelves, throwing them against the walls. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. The police arrived within minutes, their lights flashing outside. By then, Laura had moved on to the dining room, yanking down the curtains, rod and all. Emma and Raymond stood in the doorway, cheering her on. 3 officers stepped inside, taking in the destruction. One of them turned to Laura. "Ma'am," he said firmly. "What you're doing is a crime," the officer said firmly. "If you don't stop right now, we'll have no choice but to arrest you." Laura finally stopped. She stood in the middle of the wrecked living room, breathing heavily, surrounded by the mess she had made. I gathered everyone at the dining room table, the only piece of furniture still standing. "You're leaving."
Now.
My voice was steady. "Not in 3 weeks. Today." Laura's eyes widened. "You've shown exactly who you are," I continued. "And I want you out of my house. Immediately." "You can't just," Emma started. "I can, and I will." I crossed my arms. "Pack your things. Take what Dad left you in the will, the jewelry, the car, whatever. But if you're not gone by sunset, I'm calling the police again. And this time, they won't just give you a warning." They started shouting, swearing, throwing insults and threats. I didn't respond. I just pulled out my phone and started dialing 911 again. That got their attention. The next few hours were filled with angry footsteps, doors slamming, and muttered curses. Laura and Emma shoved their clothes into suitcases. Raymond packed up his things. They made multiple trips, loading everything into their cars. I followed them through the house, making sure they only took what belonged to them. Laura tried to sneak out with some of Mom's old silverware, but when she saw me holding my phone, she put it back. Raymond had already moved his precious new Mercedes into the driveway. Emma and Laura packed up their jewelry boxes, glaring at me the whole time. As Laura passed me at the door, she hissed, "You'll regret this. You're just like your mother, selfish and entitled." I smiled. "Thank you. That's the nicest thing you've ever said to me." The moment their cars disappeared down the street, I called a locksmith. He arrived within the hour and changed every lock in the house. As I watched him work, I made a mental list of everything that needed fixing. Laura had destroyed the living room, shredded wallpaper, broken furniture, books and decorations scattered everywhere. The dining room curtains lay in a heap on the floor, the rod bent beyond repair. It would take weeks to fix everything. I picked up my phone and called Aunt Anna, my favorite relative and the only one who had seen through Laura from the beginning. "The vultures are gone," I told her. "Thank God," she said. "How bad is the damage?" "Pretty bad. I need to hire contractors to fix everything, but I have to go back to college." "Say no more, honey. I'll take care of it." I let out a breath. Once it's fixed, I'm renting it out. A proper lease with proper tenants. No more freeloaders. After hanging up, I walked through the house one last time. Despite the mess, it felt lighter. Like a shadow had finally been lifted. I ran my fingers along the walls, remembering how much Mom had loved this house, how she had made sure it would always be mine. The next morning, I left for college, handing Aunt Anna my keys and insurance information. As the train pulled away from the station, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: hope. The house would be repaired. It would help pay for my education through rental income. Most importantly, it would stay in the family, just like Mom wanted. Her legacy would live on. I never saw Laura or her kids again. Sometimes I wonder if they ever think about how different things could have been if they had just been kind. If they had treated me like family instead of a burden. But mostly, I don't think about them at all.